G'day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another Warframe guide. Today we're going to be looking at Mag, one of the most divided frames in all of Warframe. People will argue to the teeth to say she sucks, and some say she's the strongest frame in the game. To those who say she's bad, you're entitled to your opinion, even if it's wrong. But I know what you're gonna say. Makari! All I'm gonna say is, shut up, listen up, and all you naysayers, I'm going to show you why Mag is as good as she is and how she can be as handy as possible with this handy-dandy guide. In short, Mag is an amazing frame with an amazing amount of potential to lock down maps, obliterate enemies, provide support and crowd control to your team. Mag has had a stigma for a very long time of being a bad frame. Not because she is bad, but because she is one of those frames in the game that actually requires, wait for it, effort. A badly built Mag is going to suck major horse dongs. But for those who can really see the glory that lies underneath those bad builds, she is and forever will be one of the strongest frames you'll ever get your grubby little fingertips on. To get the most out of Mag, you're going to need to understand her builds well. They require a finesse that most other frames don't really associate to. There's a lot of complexity that can go into these. You need to understand how they affect the abilities, and then to also realize weapon synergy is key with Mag if you truly want to make the most of her abilities when you're pumping out damage. Putting time into this girl and she will be one of your favorite frames in no time. I can assure you of this because I hated her at one point and now I think she's the bee's knees. The main way you do this is by comboing abilities, making sure that you are always aware of the abilities to use in the right situation and when. Because of this, Mag's playstyle can change on the fly and be very adaptive. You'll be using your 1 in synergy with your 3 sometimes you'll use your 4 in synergy with your 2, and sometimes you'll just spam them all together and realize you've just killed the entire map. It's a case of finding out as to what works for you and realizing which ability works in which situation. Now this sort of complexity may seem a bit odd seeing as Mag is a beginner frame. And as beginner frames go, she's going to be very complicated for a lot of people as it will confuse and maybe misunderstand her due to the complexity of how to get the most out of her. But this is hardly the case. Although she will be a little bit overwhelming for new players, ability-wise, she has some of the higher base health and shield stacks of any of the starter frames. And because of that, along with her ability just having an innate amount of high ability strength, she can often be very destructive in the early stage, assuming you have the energy to actually cast your abilities. So even if you get to the point of where you're spamming the abilities, I mean, who doesn't like just slamming enemies all over the place, making them ragdoll and deal an inane amount of damage, whilst also just being able to suck up all the loot around you, whilst being able to also generate some support for your team with shield regeneration, disruption, ammo jamming, weapon jamming. In short, realistically speaking, Mag has a massive potential, and we're really going to try and make you see this through this video here. In terms of playstyles, because of the adaptive nature of Mag, you're never going to see a specific playstyle be played overall, whereas you're going to play your playstyle based on the map, based on how you built, and you'll see this as we go through the abilities with this video. Mag is obtained from the Sergeant. Yeah, that guy. That guy that dies in 2 hits, has no abilities, and you can pretty much do an entire run of in about 2 minutes. So in order to get Mag, you'll pretty much need to run it maybe an hour's worth to get all the pieces. Little known fact though, you can also obtain her fully crafted from Conclave at Typhoon rank for 60,000 Conclave reputation. The drop chance from the Sergeant with the chassis and the neuroptics is 38.72%. The Systems has a drop chance of 22.56%. And the Prime version, unfortunately, as of this video, is vaulted. But DE has a chronic tendency of unvaulting her at the most inopportune times, so keep your eyes open and you may very well run into her, otherwise you'll need to get lucky with running into relic popping groups where you may actually find someone with the relics. I mean, she's been out of the vault enough that there's plenty of relics floating around, so, you know, keep your eyes open. Mag weighs in her regular form with 225 health at level 30, with 450 shield, which is a lot by the way. It is one of the highest base shield rates of any frame in the game. So for a new player, that's pretty good. 65 armor, 188 energy, 1.0 sprint, with 2 polarities and 1 aura slot. Her prime variant comes in with 300 health, 450 shields, 65 armor, 262 energy, 1.0 sprite, 3 polarities, and most of these are pretty decent rolls, so you're not really going to need to do too much to reform her. Ideally, an ideal build, which you'll see later, will require upwards of 2, maybe 3 former if you're putting on primed and umbral mods potentially, and 1 aura mod as well. For a beginner frame, she's highly durable, she's got some pretty decent polarities, and outside of what people would expect of her, she's quite easy to get into and quite easy to understand right off the bat with the way she presents herself to a new player especially. Moving on to Mag's abilities, starting with her passive. The passive is a very lovely passive for beginners, as it is a default vacuum type passive that draws in items, ammo, health orbs, and all that good stuff when you bullet jump. So you do have to do the bullet jump to get the vacuum to activate, and there's not much you can do to abuse the mechanics of this. It is a default vacuum that will draw things to you as you bullet jump. Longer bullet jumps will cause them to follow you for longer. Which, as for a new player, this can be very useful, as if you are not used to picking up all the items you come by or looting all the resources, this is very, very convenient and very new player friendly, in fact. Something that I think goes a little bit understated with our old Mag here. Mag's first main ability is Pull. This isn't how you interact with women on a Friday night, I'm telling you that now. Pull is a ability which, as the title says, pulls enemies within a 25-meter cone in front of her also within a small ring around her towards her, inflicting 300 magnetic damage. This is doubled if the enemy is under the effect of magnetized, however. Enemies pulled have a 25% increased chance to drop energy orbs. This is a phenomenal ability for crowd control and can be used to really abuse enemies, to knock them off their feet, to give you a bit of breathing room, and, you know, maybe knock them off the edge of a building somehow, so maybe they just die that way rather than dealing with their level. The damage and the velocity of the pull, and the orb drop chance are affected by ability strength. The augment for pull is called Greedy Pull. This adds a 100% chance to tug in loot around your area to your location. This has a tremendously long range and can also be affected by ability range as well. The travel time of the loot is also affected by power strength, and this again adds to that lovely utility of being able to draw in more loot to you, as if your passive wasn't enough to keep loot flowing your way. You now have the ability of making sure you have all the loot within a 500-meter radius. Magnetize is Mag's 2. Now this is a biggie and takes a lot of explaining, so I'm going to do this in segments first by just showing you the raw ability. Mag creates a powerful magnetic shield that encompasses and anchors an enemy in place. The field has a 4-meter radius initially and lasts for 15 seconds, and will slowly drag in all enemies in range during the field's lifetime. All projectiles, bullets, are polarized and will be redirected towards the center of the bubble. The incoming damage from all sources will be multiplied by 200%. Additionally, the field absorbs damage from all redirected projectiles and bullets and polarized shards, and deals 25% of its damage per second to all enemies within. If the initial target dies while magnetized, the field destabilizes and explodes at the end of its duration for 300 blast damage in a 15-meter radius. Each time an enemy is hit by the damage ticks inside the bubble, 25% of the currently absorbed damage gets added to the explosion damage. In short, this is an immensely powerful ability that will require synergy between weapons, as different weapons will end up dealing different types of damage. You can have up to 3 different instances of the bubble active at any given time to multiply this damage even further. Should you cast a 4th one, the first bubble you spammed will just be taken down and then refresh. When the bubble does explode, this is where a lot of the finisher damage could happen, but you may not even get to that point depending on the weapon you use, and we're going to kind of give you a demonstration of that now. So in short, if you want to make this as simple as possible for the sake of a new player's perspective, let's just take these bombards. As we all know, bombards are some of the toughest nut enemies out there, and this will show you just how powerful this ability can be with the right weapon set. So let's take a slightly faster paced weapon, for example. What you would ideally want to do is make sure they're affected by magnetize so you can get the full experience of this ability, but for the sake of just showing the 2 on its own, we're just going to use it as it is. So you're going to activate your 2 and it will draw all the enemies in. As you start shooting the bubble at any point, all those bullets are going to be redirected to the middle of the bubble, dealing a huge amount of damage. Not only that, you then get the passive dot damage that will be dealt to anyone inside of it, and once the bubble does end, it will then destabilize and shrink inwards, dealing a large amount of blast damage once the explosion has finished. The weapon you want to use is going to synergize extremely well. So all that damage we just did got stored up and just absolutely one-shot level 160 bombards. So you can see the potency of this, even with a very lackluster weapon. The potency here is amazing. If you want to build slightly less duration to make the bubble last less so you can get that pop a little bit quicker, that can very easily be done as well, which is actually not a bad idea. However, we'll go more into the build synergy a bit later. If you really want to maximize the potential damage on this weapon, there are certain weapon recommendations I can give you. Weapons such as Lanka, such as Penta, for example, weapons that have a projectile that is quite large and physical, can deal some absurd damage. So let's take the Lanka. Higher base damage weapons will also scale much better with this. So things like sniper rifles, things like shotguns, even beam weapons here can be incredibly potent. As you can see, the damage going in here is insane, and you can see the projectile of the Lanka also flailing around inside as well. And the great thing is, because you can cast this multiple times, you will cast this multiple times on each other to get the most damage out of it, like so. Absolutely destroys them. If we go back and just grab the Penta a moment, I want to show you an example of the sort of interesting mechanics you can get with the physical interaction of the projectile. So the Lanka is a very wise choice, using some element type with high crit chance to get a lot of damage out of this. But let's take the Penta, for example. The Obscured Penta, the regular Penta, you can use this for this gimmick on its own as well. Now, the way the projectile happens is the projectile will deal damage on every instance of contact, and that can happen multiple times every second. So as you can see, the projectiles being fired in are hitting incredibly fast. Although this doesn't generally add to the explosive damage that will be dealt once the bubble ends, it's like music. It's like music. It's absolutely hilarious. This in of itself could be a band or some music or whatever. It's kind of hilarious though. Have a bit of a play with this. This is one of Mag's main abilities that can have utmost amount of potential depending on how you play with it. I would highly recommend giving this ability as much attention as you can, more so than any of her other abilities, as there is a lot of different build types and different element types that can really abuse this mechanic very heavily. You can see how the projectile is just absolutely flailing around. Every time one of those interacts with an enemy, that is more damage. Okay, so before we wrap up this, there's one last little thing that needs to be mentioned. The bubbles can be affected by frame abilities as well. So we've got our handy dandy Excalibur here, so we put up our bubble. You will quite quickly see just how much damage this does if our lovely Excalibur starts swiping away. The waves of energy are also being sent directly to the middle as a typical projectile would. Again, another amazing element as to how this interacts with the magnetize. Yes, magnetize, that's the word. It is truly an amazing feat to be seeing how this works with different mechanics. The augment for magnetize is called Magnetized Discharge. This is a lovely little ability, augment thing, that allows you to manually detonate magnetize by recasting it, which will also give you a 50% chance of disarming enemies affected by it. They then wander around for a moment looking like confused little puppies that have lost their owner, and will then regain their weapons once the duration has ended. Polarize is Mag's 3. Mag produces a pulse of magnetic energy with an initial radius of 8 meters that expands outwards over 5 seconds, at a constant speed of 5.9 meters per second for a 37.5 meter total radius. If the enemy has shields, the pulse deals 400 damage to it. So probably be a better idea if we go and grab some corpus units here a second. If the enemy has armor, the armor value gets reduced by 400, and the enemy additionally suffers true damage equal to the armor removed. This is very, very powerful. So not only do you have potency versus corpus, but against Grineer targets, you even have more based on the fact that it is true damage. True damage, for those who don't know, is essentially damage unmitigated by anything. So it doesn't matter what they have, it will deal that true damage. Additionally, and we'll need my companion here a second. So if maybe you follow me down here, please. Additionally, allies' shields are restored by 400 if they are present in the initial radius or come in contact with the pulse after it's cast. So if we activate this, you'll see the damage dealt to the mowers. And if we see our little friend here, those shields go all the way back up. An amazing ability, supportive and aggressive in the same manner. All enemies with shields or armor with the initial radius come in contact with the expanding pulse will produce a violent outburst of magnetic energy, inflicting 250% of the drained shields or armor as magnetic damage to all other enemies within an 8-meter radius of each drained target. On top of that, you also generate these lovely little shards down here, which can then be used in conjunction with your Polarize, dealing a similar amount of ticking damage as a regular projectile would. The shield and armor damage value and the shield restoration of your Polarize are affected by ability strength. The initial radius is affected by ability range, and the pulse travel time is also affected by ability duration. As a little tip, this can also then be used in conjunction to revive shields on cryopods and excavators. As if this ability couldn't get any better, the augment for this is called Counterpulse. And this is a great augment to have on at any given time, regardless of build you're using. Counterpulse will jam enemy weapons, and robotic targets specifically will be disabled for 4 seconds. Wow, I mean, seriously, the augment, any build, any type of setup for this will be amazing. This removes almost every enemy from play. It does suffer a smidge against Infested, but against Corpus or Grineer, you're going to have a great deal of fun with this, as it'll give you that little bit of leeway to maybe have a bit of reprieve, to maybe put down an energy plate or a health plate, or to maybe deal some more damage, or put down your 4 or your 1. Again, another amazing augment which I would highly recommend on any build where you're going to be using your 3 quite consistently. Mag's 4 is called Crush. You know, just like, not like the relationship you had where you crushed on that hot girl with really gigantic assets in school. No. Crush is an ability that magnetizes the bones of all enemies within an 18-meter radius and suspends them in the air, and then forcibly compresses their bodies, inflicting 1,500 magnetic damage over 3 segments. Maybe this is more like my old relationship then. Crush deals 1,500 extra damage over 3 segments, as well as the main target of the magnetized field. Additionally, allied Warframes and companions in the radius of the abilities have their shields replenished by 40 on cast, plus an additional 25 per enemy hit per tick. Working in conjunction with your 3, this can be very, very nice. Although the damage does not scale tremendously well, again, acting as a good crowd control. This is very reminiscent of Oberon's 4 himself. The damage of this and extra damage are affected by ability strength, so the more ability strength you build for, the more this will do. This won't scale tremendously well for higher levels, but for lower levels this is a great wave clear, again, much like Oberon's 4. The radius is affected by ability range, and this works very well against Corpus and slightly less against Grineer, but it's very, very good in general as a synergy ability with everything else you're going to be doing for a bit of a leeway. Something to realize as well is it is very, very mana hungry. You're going to be using up a lot of energy to keep this bad boy going, especially when you've got drains and nullifiers around. So really you would use this so long as you're above a certain energy pool, and you might want to try and save using it if you're running below, say, 100, maybe 150 energy. Is even with 175% efficiency, you're going to be tanking your energy if you keep casting this over and over again. So in an ideal situation, what you would do is you would activate your 3 to get that initial Polarize off. You would activate your 4 to slam everything down. And if you want to be really cheeky, you can do something similar with your 2 to cause enemies to be dragged in like so. You would then have the 3 getting all those little shards up, and then you'd use your 4 to then deal the damage to everything within inside as well. So you could then work this around like so, dealing a huge amount of damage to anything within the Polarize, and if you so felt like it, you can then also tug them around like an absolute ragdolled monkey kind of thing. As the glazing and hot gravy to a hot roast on a Sunday morning, Fracture and Crash is the spice of life when it comes to the augment for Crush. Fracture and Crash will cause any surviving enemy to have their armor reduced by 50% and become unable to move for 7 seconds. This is immensely useful as extra crowd control. Although they can still shoot, they are immobile. Against Infested, this adds that lovely extra bit of spice that can definitely make this a much better ability. However, that minus armor in conjunction with your 3, for example, let's just face it, there's not much that's going to have armor after you've gone through a cycle of your abilities. Just keep spamming your 3, keep spamming your 4, And the enemy eventually will have so little armor that they'll be like a JRPG female character where apparently less armor equals more. And last but not least, we're going to look at some builds here in a moment. Now, there are many more builds that you can go for with Mag. However, I'm going to give you 2 builds that I have looked into that are pretty good for new players and are generally pretty easy to go for. That will work very well across a broad range of scenarios. We're going to look at this one, which is a generic build, which will work in almost all situations. You're going to start with your aura. Now, with Mag, if you do not have Arcane Energize, I would highly recommend making this into Energy Siphon, as having that extra bit of energy generation is going to be extremely useful, especially with how much you're going to be casting your abilities. Corrosive Projection can still be good, but you already have the ability of reducing armor with her abilities anyway, so it's not necessary, but if you don't plan on using your 4 to save energy, this can add as a booster to that. Now, with this build in particular, you're looking for a good balance, but with most builds on Mag, range is key. On any build, unless you're doing something extremely gimmicky, using your reach, auger reach, and stretch for that range is going to be extremely useful. You don't need more range unless you're going for a wave clear style build, but using the other power strength mods might, also the range mods might not be as effective as you might think. Having 190 range is more than enough for most maps. Then you've got some duration on there to make the bubble last a bit longer. You could, again, get rid of that to make the bubble last less to get that explosive damage off there as well. Intensify and potentially using Power Drift would be the only power mods you would need for this build. You don't need a massive amount of power strength for a general playstyle with Mag. However, power strength can be used with other builds we'll look at in a moment, for example. Streamline is really the only efficiency mod you need for this, as it's going to be relying more heavily on using your 1, your 2, and your 3. The 4, again, is situational, and you know you can swap out a couple of things here or there. When it comes to defensive mods, because you have flow, quick thinking works very well in synergy with this. You could essentially go with Pain Threshold if you have it to work with that as well, but it's entirely up to you. Because this is a general build where you're going to be using your 2 and 3 a lot, Counterpulse is going to be a very useful mod in this situation. You could swap this out for the other augments if you so chose, but I found this build, as a generalized build, carries you through most content without any issue. Quick Thinking could become Vitality if you don't have Quick Thinking or you want to be a bit more stable. It's entirely down to you. And when it comes to the second build, again, Aura mod, choose what would work for you. Corrosive Projection, Energy Siphon, it's entirely down to your prerogative. This one is more about looking at the efficiency of using your 1 to tug enemies in, and then dealing lots of damage with your 4. This is something you would more so use if you felt like being a bit more of a damage dealer with your base abilities, as you still have the potential with this to deal damage with your 2 and the synergy with your weapons. But this is more so of a heavy caster type build. You're going to try and reach the 175% efficiency mark with Fleeting Expertise and Streamline. You could essentially go with a level 3 Fleeting Expertise and a fully leveled Streamline should you so wish. This is just personally the combination of the two that I personally like using. Again, you've got the Auger Reach and the Stretch on there for that 190% range. Although we've gotten rid of Cunning Drift to go down to 175. Again, this could be swapped out for Cunning Drift should you so wish, but we're trying to get as much power strength of this build as possible without sacrificing duration as much as possible. So we've got Transient Fortitude, Intensify, Power Drift for that bonus damage. Because you're not using Flow with this build, I would recommend more so using Vitality, possibly even Redirection, seeing as you have that utility of shield regeneration on the fly. Continuity to help you with the duration of the knockdowns and also the polarize should you use it, as you are going to be sacrificing a lot of duration with this build. Now, these two builds will cover a lot of the fundamentals of what Mag can do. There is a lot of nitty-gritty build mechanics that could work here, but these two builds will work in almost any situation. That's the main point. If you want to fiddle around with builds, I would highly recommend going to Simulacrum, because there's a lot of things that can be changed depending on the mods you use. For example, you could, in theory, swap out any power strength mod and just focus purely on having the biggest polarize possible to have it affect a larger area. On Hydron, for example, a max range mag can lock down an entire map, and then you can be just outside the polarize to deal damage to everything within it. That then in conjunction using your 4, you're going to lock down the map entirely. You would then need to make sure you had 175% efficiency to make that work, but you get the idea. There are infinite builds here that could work, that would be interesting to see in different situations. So that has been the mag guide. Hopefully it's been informative. If you are liking these videos, do consider pressing that that subscribe button. Maybe even drop the video a like. Leave a comment down below if you want to see specific guides in the future, or if you have suggestions for what you want to see. And I would highly recommend to come and join us on our Twitch channel. I'll leave a link in the description as well, as we record these on stream, giving you the ability to come and join us and also take part in the videos. Much like our friend Gibibby here, he joined us through the Twitch channel, and we'll be taking advice from the Twitch chat to shape these videos to be more representative of how a new player's experience should be. So thank you very much for watching, hopefully you've enjoyed yourself, and I'll see all of you top hatters in the next video.